Now let's return to David Cameron's call to reform the welfare system and the possibility of changes to child tax credits. I'm joined in the studio now by Dr. Samantha Callan, Associate Director of the Centre for Social Justice and former advisor to David Cameron on family policy, and Andrew Harrop, who is General Secretary of the Fabian Society, a Labour think tank. Welcome to you both. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Let's just start perhaps with you, Samantha, and just tell us what you thought of David Cameron's speech today and what we can take from it.
I was hugely encouraged by his emphasis on families. It's something that I think he struggled to talk a lot about when he was in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. But I think we're seeing a return to the exciting David Cameron of 2005 when he was elected as leader, and when he said, I'm going to tackle family breakdown because it is a driver of poverty.
Andrew Harrop, did you see things in quite the same way?
Well, there were some warm words about families today, but the reality was that he was not ruling out the £12 billion of social security cuts that have been talked about through the election campaign.
Yeah, we're fairly sure that that's going to happen.
That's going to go ahead.
Yeah.
What that would mean would be taking something like £1,000 a year away from low and middle income families. 12 million of those would have to suffer a £1,000 cut to add up to £12 billion. It's a huge
How are you coming to
impact.
that conclusion? Because we didn't actually learn that much today, do we? We know that he wants to cut 12 billion from the welfare bill, but he didn't specify in what way he was going to do that today.
Right.
So how are you coming to that conclusion?
So far we've had very small announcements from the government which wouldn't add up to anything like 12 billion. The speculation is that the real money would have to come from cutting child tax credits. That's the money that goes to not just families who aren't working, but families in low-paid work to make sure that they can meet the costs of providing a decent childhood for their family.
You've worked with David Cameron. How accurate do you think that speculation is?
I think what we've got to bear in mind about welfare reform is we're trying to mimic the world of work for those who are in welfare. We're trying to set up, when I say we, the Centre for Social Justice designed universal credit, designed the principle that the more you work, the more you should be able to keep of your benefits, because there used to be these cliff edges. If you work more than 16 hours, you'd lose a lot. And there's a sense in which, as well, you just didn't have the same choices. Frankly, you could have as many children as you wanted without having to think about the financial consequences. And that's what I think needs to be at the heart of a system that's getting away from this kind of addiction to welfare. It's not just welfare claimants. Employers, they could rely on the government to top up lousy wages. Housing rents, you know, this kind of...
So you want to pass the emphasis to employers, basically. So people who work should be paid enough that they don't need tax credits.
I'm sure Andrew would agree that the living wage is a real priority, and we need to
sort that out first, don't you, before you remove tax credits?
Well, the thing, it's got to be the whole system. As I say, there's an addiction to welfare that just doesn't mimic the kind of choices that you have to make when you are trying to hold down a job and look after children, when you're not at all reliant on benefits.
We're talking about a group of people who are in work, who are doing what the government asks them to do. If you were, say, a single parent with 3 children working full-time, you still need tax credits to be able to look after your children well. And the work that your think tank has done in the past has been all about making work pay. Well, if you take money away from people in work with children, they won't see any point in going into work. They'd be more likely just to want to stay on benefits.
Which has the polar opposite effect of what you're talking about, isn't it?
It's absolutely essential.
It's encouraging people out of work.
No, first, you're absolutely right. We do not know what the budget is going to say yet. But what we absolutely have to do is encourage people to progress in work and not to stay in low-paid jobs. That's essential. But also, the problem with a child poverty measure that is purely about income means it doesn't look at the rest of a child's life. It used to be, under the old tax credit system, you're better off, people's perception was you're better off living without a second parent in the home, and so you would maybe have just enough money to go over a child poverty target.
If you're on benefits.
Well, there needs to be more to be done to tackle the couple penalty. I couldn't agree more. But the point is, the welfare system used to reward types of behaviour that were just not pushing in the direction of improving children's outcomes at all. And I think that's the...
How does removing child tax credits improve the outcome for children?
If child tax credits constantly go up more than wages, then we're not encouraging the kind of lifestyle that says I'm going to get out of welfare dependency. The sense that you could always live on welfare. We need to break that. We've got an expectation in this country that you'll always need welfare, and it's trying to just break that so that you can't just get tax credits for every single additional child.
Andrew, there's some truth in that, isn't there? You're either dependent on welfare solely, or you're dependent on welfare to top up your wages, even if you're a hard-working couple.
I'd love there to be less low pay and people to be paid more for relatively unskilled work. But the reality is we're not going to change that situation quickly. And even if we had much higher pay at the bottom of the labour market, if you have a large family, you'll still need help to make sure you can make ends meet. And that's not going to change anytime soon. It's certainly not going to change if there are huge cuts now, which, as I say, are more likely to have more people staying out of work rather than getting into that first job and hopefully progressing once they've got their first low-paid job.
But David Cameron has said he wants to end the merry-go-round where, people go to work, they're paid, they give their money to the government in forms of taxes, and then some of it is given back. I mean, that is all quite bonkers. You put it like that, isn't it?
But you could use exactly the same argument for paying the schools or the health service. We all pay taxes and we all get money back at times of need, and that's true of public services, but it's also true if you're in low-paid work through the social security system.
I think we have got to get away from this idea that the state does it all. There's
But someone has to. You can't just remove something, can you? You need to put things in place first.
There is such a pressure on the culture in this country is if you split up with your partner, the state will look after you. And I think we have got to get to the point where parents expect to look after their children together, to pull together, to earn together, and currently we just do not have those emphases in our welfare system. It's educators, it's employers, it's families, not just the state. The state can never do the whole job.
OK, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, both of you.